gym should be illegal. It's just humiliating. But Dave Petrakis was nice to me. He invited me over to do lab more. But I said no. I just can't. And Ivy talked to me. Say something. Anything. My throat is dry, and it hurts.
There's a fire in me, melting at the bottom of the sea. It was a beautiful thing. And all these memories trying to hold me back, but they can't see. I was born to be free. Yeah.
I matriculated when I was 19. I already had a son who had just been born, and I decided to go and get a job like most people after they finished school. I didn't have further education, so I decided to get a waitressing job, and I did. So I got a job, and I got a job waitressing. So I had some school friends that were, I think, a year above me, and they all had boyfriends at that time, and after work the boyfriends would come and pick them up, and they'd probably sit around after work and talk and have a drink at the bar or something like that. I had a friend, and her boyfriend one day after coming to pick her up said to me that he wanted to talk to me. So I was like, okay. And he spoke to me and he said, well, I can see that you're struggling, and would you like to make some extra money? So I said, okay, well, how? And it's funny how you trust someone, especially because they're your friend's boyfriend, you know, and he was much older, at least 12 years older than her. So I listened to his story. So he gave me this story that I could carry a package overseas. Some girls, they go by boat, some girls, they go by aeroplane, and they carry a package, and you're going to have a free holiday. When you get back, we're also going to pay you money, and you get to go to a lovely island called Mauritius and have 7 days of absolute fun, and all you have to do is carry this package. So I was a little bit skeptical. I hadn't heard of many stories at that stage of that type of thing. I must say I might have been a little bit naive at 19, a little bit more naive than I think most people my age. I think that I was 19 when I matriculated because they kept me back, emotional immaturity. I knew that I was a little bit more sheltered and naive than most people my age. But anyway, I did say no. After saying no, a month went by, 2 months went by, and I couldn't afford to keep my son anymore. So I gave him to his father's grandmother for her to take care of. And that bothered me a lot because I wanted to be close to him and I wanted to be able to take care of him. So I approached my friend again. I didn't approach my friend. So we went to work one day again, and her boyfriend came, and I spoke to him again, and I said, okay, well, I'm actually in need of some cash. What do I do? So he said, okay, I'm going to get somebody to call you. So I waited for that person to call me. Eventually, a call came through about a few days later. It must have been about 4 days later. And they said, can we meet? Do you have a passport? I said, yes, I do have a passport. And they said, okay, can you please bring your passport with you? And we will meet at so-and-so restaurant. So I went for the appointment. I met these 2 Tanzanian guys, which I was quite shocked because I thought that it was going to be white guys because it was the white guy who had introduced me. Met these guys and they started to tell me, okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to pay you 10,000 Rand and we need you to carry a package. and we will be in contact later. Is that okay with you? So I said, okay, fine. They didn't tell me how it was going to be packaged at that stage or anything. So a few days later, they called me and they said, okay, they took my passport from me to book the tickets, and they said to me, okay, we've booked your ticket. In 3 days, you'll be flying. So I said, okay, that's fine. Still very nervous. They phoned me again and said, we have to pick you up the night before, and we'll put you into a hotel the night before, and then from there we will pick you up from that specific hotel and take you straight through to the airport and give you what you're carrying. So they took me to a hotel. We got to the hotel, they bought me food, anything that I wanted, and explained to me that they will see me in the morning. So in the morning they came, they gave me a pair of shoes. Apparently what I was supposed to be taking abroad was packed in those shoes. I wasn't specifically sure what it was that was in the shoes, but I obviously knew it was something illegal. That's why it was such a secret, and obviously we were being paid, but not specifically what it was for. I think at that stage I didn't really understand the consequences to something like that. I think at that age you're an adult but you're not, and you don't really understand the consequences to something like this. It's all perhaps a game, maybe. That's perhaps the way you think of it. That's maybe the way I thought about it. And they gave me the package, we drove to the airport. After that, I got on the plane, stopped in Johannesburg, got on another plane, and went straight through to Mauritius. 4 hours later we landed. I was very nervous when we got there. It's a foreign country with foreign language, and I wasn't sure. I was told when I got there that I should go to so-and-so hotel. I'd had it written down, so when I passed through the immigrations, I wrote the hotel that I was given to. I'd been given a little bit of money to take a cab from the airport to that hotel. The day I got there, it was pouring with rain, I remember, and I was so scared because these items, I actually had to wear them on my feet. The shoes, I actually had to wear them on my feet, and I was walking on them, and I thought every time I walked through the puddles of water that, something might fall out. So I was very nervous. I got to the hotel, quickly checked in, locked myself in the room, was very, very scared. There was a safe, took the shoes off, put them in the safe. Then they called me about 2 hours later and told me, okay, somebody's going to come outside, keep your phone with you, we'll call you, go outside, put the shoes in a plastic and go outside and meet this person. So it was still raining. There was a car that pulled up, somebody got out, and I gave them the shoes and went back into the hotel. After that, the rest of the 7 days, I had a fabulous time. They'd given me money. It was the holiday that they had promised. After the 7 days, I went back to the airport and went back home. They paid me my 10,000 Rand, and the first thing I did was go and buy clothes for my child and everything, and I was so happy that I could actually contribute to looking after him. I felt responsible. I felt that I could provide for him. I didn't realize the consequences of it. Then again, about 2 months later, they approached one of the guys who had met me that day and taken my passport, phoned me, and he said, my cousin, who you went for to Mauritius the last time, he's away at the moment, but I'd like you to carry something for me. And I said, okay, sure. You don't realize that a lot of this stuff is sort of, I would say, maybe gang related, and they have their own politics that you absolutely have nothing, you don't even know what's going on in the background. You only know that, okay, somebody's asking you to go again, and went successfully, so you're going to go again. So I did that, I accepted it. And the same procedure, I took my passport, booked my ticket, exactly the same procedure. The only difference this time was the cousin that he had said had traveled and was not around, called me 2 days before and said to me, Charnelle, you know that if you decide to do a job for somebody else, I won't be able to help you if you get in trouble. And I just took that very, very lightly. I just thought, again, it was something, I was very naive. It was something, I didn't understand the politics of the big world, the adult world, how it works, how people are, that the way the world works. And I just thought, okay, And I told him, well, I'm not traveling anywhere at the moment. I'm not feeling well. I've hurt my leg, and so I won't be traveling for anybody anyway. So he said, okay. I think in some way he tried to warn me about what was about to happen, and I didn't understand it in the bigger sense of what he was trying to tell me. I don't know if you believe in dreams or whatever, but the night before he picked me up to go to the hotel, I had dreamt that my plane had crashed while I was in Mauritius, and the plane was in pieces on the runway, and I had actually got out of it and it was on fire, and I walked down the runway. At that point, I probably, if I was in my normal senses, should have realized, don't go. That was 2 warnings, but I still went ahead. So the guy picked me up and took me to the hotel, went to the airport the next day, got on a plane and went through to Mauritius, took my paper, booked into my hotel. And the first day nobody came to pick up the package, which is usually not the case. They usually come straight away. And there was a little bit of nervousness in me, but I still thought, okay, it's fine. The second day they told me to get up and I should put the shoes again in the plastic and go to the waterfront that is there in Mauritius, in Port Louis, and I should take the shoes with me. Somebody will meet me there. They'll keep in contact. So I said, fine. So I packed the shoes and I descended down to the reception area and asked them to call a cab. When I got to the reception area, everything looked absolutely normal, but within 2 minutes of me asking for a cab, there were 20 policemen surrounding me, and they escorted me to a back office in the hotel. I was very shocked. I was very surprised. I had the bag. I sat on a chair. I had the bag of shoes behind me on the chair. And at that point, I was very, very nervous. They started asking me questions. How did I get here? Why am I here? What am I doing? How long am I staying for? Do I have any package with me? And I said no about 2-3 times, and then realized I'm not going to get anywhere with this. I should just tell them. So I told them no, they're in this pair of shoes, gave them the shoes. So then they did something that's called a controlled arrestation. They wanted to catch the people who were supposed to come and pick up the package. So for the next 7 days, I was taken to another hotel where I had phoned my contact in South Africa to tell them that I'm still waiting for the person to come collect the package, and the person has not. I'm in so-and-so hotel and waiting for their reply. The person still didn't come, and there were phone calls back and forth, and me having to convince the person in South Africa that I hadn't been caught. It was very difficult. That 7 days in the hotel, you can't even go to the toilet by yourself. You have to be watched when you go to the toilet, because they're under the assumption maybe that you have swallowed drugs as well, that maybe when you go to the toilet to remove drugs, you'll try and get rid of them, because there are people who do swallow drugs. You're not left alone. There are policemen, there were like 10 always with me, 24 hours. You're under stress, and all I could think about was my son back home. What am I going to tell them? What am I going to tell my family? What am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this? So it was a lot of pressure. And then on the 7th day, I was told, okay, I phoned the guy in South Africa and I said to him, okay, I've got to get rid of this stuff, otherwise I'm going to throw it away and I'm going to go back home, because I've got my ticket to go back home. So he said, no, don't do that. I'm going to call you now of where to meet me. And then about 30 minutes later, the police came to me and they said, the investigation is over. We're going to take you somewhere now. And I saw a lot of activity, which I didn't understand what was going on. And they said, we're going to take you somewhere quickly. We want you to see something. So they took me to another hotel in the north of Mauritius. I've forgotten the name. And I went into this hotel room and they lifted up the mattress. There was a whole lot of money under the mattress. I didn't understand what was going on. There was a whole lot of lady stuff and men's stuff. I still didn't understand what was going on. From there, they took me to another hotel in the opposite direction. Went into the hotel room, and it was the hotel that they had caught me in. I still didn't understand what was going on. And then we left, and they took me to the police station. They took me to the police station, and I went to sleep. They gave me a blanket. There was a mattress on the floor that stunk of vomit and pee, and it was filthy. The toilets were filthy. They had feces all over the walls, over the seats. But I was stuck in there. You weren't allowed to keep your belongings, your suitcase. They kept it in a private cell. Half the time I didn't understand what anybody was telling me. The next morning I woke up. There's a lady who comes to the cells every morning, and they give you 2 slices of bread with butter and jam on it and some tea. I had some of that. Everything was just smelling really bad of pee and everything. I then was called to an office upstairs in the police station, which was the main office. I was kept in the main headquarters in Mauritius, the main headquarters police station. And then they took me upstairs to an office, and I saw the guy who had sent me there, and I was quite shocked because the whole time I thought he had been in South Africa. I didn't know what he was doing in Mauritius because he told me he was in Cape Town, South Africa. He was not in Mauritius, so I was shocked to see him. They then showed me another lady and asked me if I knew her, and I didn't know her. But I agreed that I knew him, and he agreed that he knew me, and that was the last time that I saw them. Then it was 2 months that I stayed in that cell, every day going to take statements after statement after statement, who I knew, who I dropped off the previous time, how it happened, all of that. I then had my 21st birthday in the police cell. And the day before my birthday, another South African was caught who had swallowed drugs. And I felt bad for her, but it was nice to have company because I'd been alone for so long. So we sat, and I tried to comfort her. She was the same age as me, and we spoke, and I tried to explain. It's funny how when you get caught, you think you're getting out next week. You think something good's going to happen. It's like going through the whole process again because somebody else is feeling what you felt 2 months ago, and you don't know how to explain that whatever they're saying or whatever the police are saying that they're going to get out if they cooperate, or if they're going to, they're not going anywhere. You're going to sit, and we're in big trouble. So the next day was my birthday, and about 4 days later I was taken to the prison. And I remember the police saying, "Oh, don't worry, prison is better here than the police cell. There's going to be hot water, and you get big pieces of chicken, and everything is really nice up there, and you're going to have friends." That was not the case. I was driven in a big police van, taken to a prison, the women's prison. There is only one women's prison in the whole of Mauritius. I was taken there, and there was high walls, huge gates with a little door in the bottom. They knocked on the door, somebody opened, and I was led through. I got to the reception. They take all your belongings from you, and they say that you can take some clothes out, that you're going to be remanded, which means that you are not convicted yet. You get to wear your civil clothes still, and you await for trial. So I took out what I needed, some toiletries. I was allowed to take my, well, you're not allowed shampoo in there, you're not allowed shoelaces, you're not allowed socks, you weren't allowed anything actually, except for your toothbrush and toothpaste and some clothes. So I took that in my arms, I carried that up. Once they'd registered me, my name and so forth, and they took me upstairs in a long hallway. And in front of that long hallway at the end were 2 gates, one to the left and one to the right. The left was for convicted convicts, the right was for remand convicts. And I just remember seeing all these faces clinging to these bars because it was a door that had that was barred. There are no real doors, it's just bars everywhere. So there are no solid doors. And I remember seeing like people hanging off those bars, and I'm thinking I'm going in there, and people are speaking another language, and I've never seen such behavior, like people hanging like monkeys on bars. And I remember walking in there, and I sat on a bench that as I got in, I didn't even go further into the room. I was just so scared, and I sat there and I held all these clothes in my hand, and I just watched what was around me. There was a TV playing in front of me. obviously in another language, a cement table with cement chairs that was like long, and people sitting playing dominoes on one side, eating on the other side, and then there was cement all around the room. Off that room, so it was just one room, that was called a recreation room. Everybody is crammed into that room. Even if you are 60, 70, 80 people, you are crammed into that one room. And it's a small room. Off that room is a passage, and that passage has doors on either side, which is the sleeping area. And that is how big the remand is. There is no other area. Off that area is another door leading to the back, where you are allowed to go out for 30 minutes into sort of a garden area, take a bit of a walk in the back. It's not really a garden, but it's an area. And I sat there for 3 years in that small room, waiting every day. And every day you stand and you wait for the mail to come, for somebody to come to the gate and tell you something, anything from the outside world. Whether you're going to court today, whether you got a letter from your family, and I had no news from anyone for the next 3 years. Not family, not friends, no one. I was alone. But we managed to survive. I don't know where I am. So for the next 3 years I stayed there. We would sleep in... So we'd wake up in the morning, you get your tea and bread, everybody would line up outside that gate, not outside, inside that room, but by the gate, and you would go and take your bread, which would be a bread roll, and your tea. And you'd take that, and you'd sit down and do nothing. And then you would, every 21 days, you'd go to court, you'd pass by a magistrate, which was inside the prison on a TV, and it would be televised. And he would tell you remanded to jail for another 21 days. And every 21 days for the next 3 years, you'd be remanded back. At night time, you would go to a cell. The cells were very, very small, no toilets in them. There would be 2 cement beds on top of each other, like a bunk bed on one side, and a metal bin, like a metal bin that they call a chamber pot, and that's where you would do everything. If you were sick and you wanted to vomit, it would be there. If you wanted to poo, if you wanted to pee, everything would be in there. You and the other people that were sleeping in your room, and usually it was 3 people, 1 on the floor and 2 on the beds, and that's how everything would be done. You'd wake up in the morning, you would empty out that chamber pot in that same room. They would have an area where you'd empty out your chamber pot, and then you'd go and take your bath and have your breakfast and whatever. The toilet conditions were very, very bad. There were toilets that were on the floor. I think it's because of the culture. You know, they come from like French colonization, and the toilets were on the floor, so it's not toilets as you know it. And most of them were, the porcelain that they had laid on the bottom was cracked, and there were worms coming out of it, and there was cement, and it was just never ever given enough cleaning solution from the guards to ever be able to clean properly or disinfect properly. Washing, you'd have to wash your clothes. You would have to buy soap once a month, once a week. They would let you write a list of things that you wanted to buy, and if somebody had left you money downstairs in the reception, you were able to buy things weekly, like soap. You weren't allowed to buy a lot. They didn't allow a lot there. You'd be able to buy soap and maybe a packet of chips, or nothing sustaining, nothing special. No tomato sauces, no jams, no things like that. So you buy your soap, and they had this rock outside that you'd go in your 30 minutes and you'd take your soap and you'd wash your clothes on a rock. And you'd scrub it, you'd rinse it, you'd put it out to dry, and in the evening you'd ask the guard to open up and you'd take your clothes. So that went on for 3 years. And then while I was still in remand, I had decided that I can't live like this. Even if I go to the convicted side, the space is just as small, and I don't want to do that. I can't stay here. South Africa doesn't have a repatriation agreement with Mauritius. So I knew I was never going back to my country. For years and years there have been South Africans who've been caught abroad, and none of them have ever been sent back to their country, even those who are on death row in other countries. So I knew whatever happened, I would be stuck here. So I decided, because my father was British, to apply for a citizenship for the UK and try and get deported back to the UK. At least my sentence would be reduced if I ever got convicted, and I would be able to be deported once convicted, because I knew I was definitely getting convicted. So I started that process. The warden at the prison was exactly like you see on the movies. I don't know why wardens are always mean and whatever, but she was also mean. She wouldn't let you have anything. She said that you could strangle yourself with shoelaces. You couldn't have shoelaces. Socks you couldn't have, because you could strangle yourself with socks, but you could do that with your bed sheet anyway. So all her rules never ever really made sense. I remember her walking into the cell while I was in remand once, and she just walked through that door, and I was sitting on the bench that was right by the door, and she took her hand and just passed it over my mouth, and she said, "You're wearing lipstick." And I wasn't. My lips were just red that day. Maybe I was feeling sick and my lips were more red. And she was just very different and mean. So she went on leave, and I decided, okay, now's my chance to write my letter to the British Embassy, because I'd been asking her forever and she had denied my request to write. So she went on leave, and they have this letter book that the Mauritians can write letters to their families, local letters to their families, and they post them for free. So I took that book, it comes on a Sunday, and I took the book and I wrote the letter to the British Embassy, got the address and sent it off to them. And they came to see me. So they came to see me, and they said they would start the procedure of trying to give me British citizenship. And I was quite excited about that. And every week, the commissioner's wife, she would come and she would visit me in the prison, and she would try to teach me how to speak French, and she would bring me little bits of food from outside, because you don't get a lot inside, and I would look forward to those visits of her coming. It would feel like something normal, again, something from the outside world. And then the day came where I went to court, and they gave me my court date, and they said I should go to court. So I went to court. It was a one-day thing. I got dressed in the morning, went to court, the High Court, and there was a lot of press outside taking photos and so on and so on. Went inside, and there were not a lot of people inside, and I went to stand in this box, and it's like your normal courtroom with your judge at the front, and the proceedings began. A few people were called forward just to testify, but I'd already agreed to doing everything, so I think there wasn't much of a fight there. And it was an Indian judge, and I remember crying through the whole proceeding, and I think that's probably the last time I ever cried in my life. I realized from that day forth that you can cry and cry, and crying never ever takes away anything. It doesn't take away the problem, it doesn't solve anything. And I think from that day I never really cried a lot afterwards, but I cried from the beginning until the end of the whole proceeding. And at the end, he had his verdict, and he had said that because I had come to Mauritius twice, he was going to sentence me twice, 10 years for the first time and 10 years for the second time, which is 20 years in prison. At that point, I was 21 years old, and I thought, by 20 years in prison, I'll only get out when I am like 40, and that's the end of my world. I still didn't understand much of what he was saying. It's a lot of jargon, a lot of court things, and at 21 I don't think you really understand much. And I asked for forgiveness and tried to explain that I was young and I actually didn't understand what I was doing, and that I did cooperate with the police, but that wasn't getting me out of anything either. I was going straight to the convicted side, and I was going to sit my sentence. So I got back so I was taken in a van again back to the prison, and when I got to the bottom it was different. I was asked to hand in all my civil clothes. I was given I was given convicted clothes, which was a blue skirt and a white shirt, and obviously no shoes. You're only allowed sandals, and I was given sandals, and that was it. I now entered into the top gate. I was not even allowed back into remand to go and fetch my stuff. I was told somebody will fetch it and take it downstairs, and I'll be called to pack it away. And I went to the convicted side. It was exactly the same as the other side, small room, and I sat. About a week later, they called me and they said to me, okay, I've been assigned to work in the laundry. And the laundry is a place where you hand in your bed sheets every week, and it will be washed by the laundry and ironed and given back in the evening. And that was my job. So I'd wake up in the morning and I would get dressed, have my breakfast, and go through to the laundry. At lunchtime, I would come back. Lunchtime would be at 10 o'clock in the morning. And you would get a plate, a silver metal plate with rice on the one side, and sometimes it would be dried salted fish, or it would be, sometimes it would be little pieces of meat that were fried with rice, or lentils with rice, or that was pretty much, the diet. It was rice every day for lunch, or something. And after eating that, you go back to the laundry, you'd work until about 2 o'clock. Then you'd come back at 2 o'clock from work, and you would get ready to go into your cell at 3 o'clock. And you would be locked in that cell until the next morning, with not much to do. In the hallway of where we slept, there used to be a radio. I remember it was this old wooden box, and it was all crackly, and they would play the radio through that. And they would play songs, and I would think of home. There was not much to do. We'd talk about things that you did in your past, your childhood, the people you knew, things like that. You try to sort of keep to yourself, not to make trouble with a lot of people. I think it was easier maybe because I was a foreigner. So foreigners would usually stick with foreigners, and we'd stick to our own side. Most of the people that would make trouble would be usually the drug addicts, and it was usually trouble amongst themselves, either stolen drugs or fights usually would break out about you stole my stuff, or a lot of the time gossiping as well. So you tend not to gossip or talk about anybody. You just do your work, you come home, you talk, not come home, go to your cell, you talk about just your things, don't talk about anybody else's, and then you sort of play it on the safe side. And there were a lot of fights. I remember seeing my first fight. That was also another day that I was still in remand, and you cry, you really cry that day, because you've never seen another woman beating another woman so badly, like that there's blood everywhere. In the normal world you don't see that, and where I come from you don't see that. So I remember crying a lot that day. And then after I was arrested, about 20 South Africans were arrested after me, South African girls, for doing the same thing, like right after me, like every week one was arrested. And I remember when we got to like number 18, when the 18th South African was arrested and she was thrown in that remand, and I remember her seeing her first fight, and she just burst into tears. And at that point I realized how hard I had become, because I looked at the fight and I was like, oh, they're fighting again, and I continued doing my things. And she absolutely also cried like I had cried my first time, and I realized at that point that I'm not the same person anymore. Something inside me snapped, or I become stronger, or I don't know what you call it, but something was different. And I also realized there was no getting my innocence back anymore, or anything. Prison had taken my innocence away from me, definitely. It had taken something that I don't think I'll ever get back. I always thought that it would be better for somebody, once they get arrested, especially when so young, to try and rehabilitate them rather than throw them in that type of a situation. Because it gets to a point where it's too late. You can't help the person anymore. Like, there is a point where the person wants to change and the person would never do something like that again, or the person would never be a horrible person again. They're really, really sorry. And then it goes over that point where now you're sort of stuck there and you start to change. And I always think, like, all the people that had been like me, young and arrested, they should have taken them out of that situation immediately, and it would have been a success story. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, well, I think when you're kept too long in an environment like that, it's actually detrimental instead of better, even for the society. Yeah. And then I don't even know where I was. What happened then? And then I was convicted. So the British Embassy was still coming to see me, and they would come and see me every week. And eventually they came back to me with the news that they weren't able to deport me back to the UK because my father was my adopted father, even though he was British, and there was a law somewhere saying children adopted after so-and-so date don't get British citizen. You have to be born before a certain date of adopted children to get citizenship. So I said, okay, fine. So I'm not going back, I'm stuck here in Mauritius prison. And I was like, okay. And I did. I found out also that it wasn't 20 years. If you get the same sentence, like I did 10 years, 10 years, then the 110 cancels out the other 10, and I have 10 years to go. And 10 years sounds like a lot to somebody who hasn't been in prison, but well, I managed to do it. It wasn't easy. There were lots of ups and downs. 10 years, yeah. Eventually there was a guy on the men's side who had told somebody that I should call. He was an Indian guy, he was a prisoner, he'd been convicted 30 years, and I knew his girlfriend who was imprisoned with me, and he said to me, you're a foreigner like me, Charnelle, and I've got 30 years, but there's a guy that I want you to phone, and he sits on a council, and that council is like the council, it's called a privy council, and they decide whether convicts should get presidential pardons or not. Phone the guy and speak to him and see what he can do for a presidential pardon. So I was a little bit confused because in Mauritius, drug cases don't get presidential pardons. Since the beginning of time, there has never been a presidential pardon. So I phoned the lawyer. Well, I phoned the guy, I didn't know he was a lawyer. I phoned him and I asked him, could he come and see me? So he came, and I asked one of my friends who also came from South Africa, could she join me? She was my very, very, very close friend. We were friends up until today. She's also outside now. And if I was getting out, I wanted to take her with me. So I told her, let's go see this guy, he's coming. So he came down into the lawyer's office and he came to see us, and he explained to us that he'd like to try and get us a presidential pardon, and he will talk to some people and try and get us out. We need to write a petition. He's got a lawyer, and he will take this case to a lawyer, and this lawyer will draw up all the papers and put in a presidential pardon for us. So he drew up. So about a month later, it was a long process. It was months and months, but we were there anyway for a long time. Months really wasn't really anything to us at that point. We'd already waited so long. And one day it came back that our papers had gone through, and my friend's paper actually went through before my paper, and they wrote a letter to tell her that she had got her pardon, and she was due to leave in another year. And my papers were pending, so I phoned the lawyer as well, and I said, where are my papers? And he said, no, your papers are going through. And eventually I also got my letter to say, okay, you have so many days left. I think I also had another year and 6 months, and then I could go home. But unfortunately, when I was sentenced, I also got a 200,000, which is, I don't know what it is in South African. I think it's about 200,000 rupees, which was maybe about, it's 4 to 200, what was it? 10,000, 20,000 rand fine that I had to pay before I can leave. If I didn't pay the fine, I would have to sit another year. So many days for the amount of money. So I got hold of a family member's friend, and they paid for my fine, and I waited for my due date to get out.
Jim should be illegal. It's just humiliating. But Dave Petraka was nice to me. He invited me over to do lab work. But I said no. I just can't. And Ivy talked to me. Say something. Anything. My throat is dry. And it hurts.
There's a fire in me, melting at the bottom of the sea. It was a beautiful thing. And all these memories trying to hold me back, but they can't see. I was born to be free.